Barrett, though, I know you told the story, and I think it's you could share your first experience going before the Supreme Court. Just your first time. Nervous as all get out. How'd you feel?
I was petrified. And I started to give my argument, and I heard a noise. And I looked around the courtroom trying to figure out who was making the noise, and I finally figured out it was Justice White, who was talking. His mouth was moving like a guppy, and I thought, he's asking me a question. And I wonder what it is. Well, Justice White is a very tough questioner, and normally if he got you in a situation like this, he'd tear your throat apart. But this time, he noticed that I was having some difficulty, and so he stopped. And I answered his question. No idea what it was. And he looked at me as if I had gone wacko, and instead of grabbing me by the throat, he just kind of smiled and leaned back and let it go. So that's how I got through my first argument.
And this is part of your mentoring? I just want to know what you learned when you joined in 1986.
Well, it's very funny you mention that, because in fact one experience that I had was somewhat similar, because Barrett had told me, if you've been to the court and seen arguments lately, you know how active they are. And you will often have one justice ask you a question, and then before you can answer, another one will jump in, and it's kind of hard to figure out what to do. So I asked him what to do, and he said, well, what you should do is always answer the one that asked you the question most recently. Don't go back and say, oh, that's very interesting, but, you know, so-and-so asked me a question. Answer that, and then go back to one that you didn't have a chance to answer. They will appreciate the fact that you're going back to them. So this actually happened to me once, and I remember Justice Stevens asked me a question, and before I could get an answer out, Justice O'Connor, I think, jumped in and asked me a question, and I answered her, and remembering Barrett's advice, I gave her the answer, and then turned to Justice Stevens and said, well, Justice Stevens, I don't think I had the chance to answer your question. And he smiled. You could tell it was working just the way Barrett said it would. And then I realized I didn't remember what his question was. So like Barrett, I just said something, you know, and his smile, he just sort of got this quizzical look on his face, like maybe he was thinking, did I ask that or not? Yeah.